Okay, it is 6, so let me get this music turned down and get the right camera brought up. Okay, good evening and welcome. It's been a couple weeks because of Thanksgiving, and then last week on Thursday night, Gentleman Stationer and Vanessa were doing a live stream announcing their new podcast project. And this normally runs a little bit longer than an hour, and I didn't want to have people having to choose or, you know, make a choice of which one to go to. So I just decided to take one extra week. And so we are back and going to be looking at the Colorverse calendar so far tonight, talking about where I'm at in the pen making, what I've done, how things are going with that, and just answering questions and kind of general talking about we're getting to the end of the year. A couple of videos that I've had the idea now that I've got my camera situation working a little bit better to record. So let's go on and get started. So to start out, Colorverse, and I'm going to not show what would be tomorrow's ink just in case anybody is following along and doesn't want the spoiler aspect. So I will leave that one out of the stack. So let me go and take that one out so I don't inadvertently show it. Okay, let me get switched to the overhead here. We'll start taking a look. Okay, so let me zoom one layer here. So one thing I've decided to do this year with the coloring cards is adding in the typewriters. I am typing the ink name on the cards because I'm opening up and doing 4 videos of 6 inks per video. And my handwriting is decent, but it's not the best for swatch cards. So I decided to just type it since I'm opening the box of all 6. And then I have a little bit of time between to try to get this lighting a little better for this. So I can kind of go through and see. So I'm really liking overall the inks that I'm seeing so far. Most of these are ones that I could see using in pens, which is very pleasing to me. And that's why I chose the Colorverse calendar to do this year. It's because last year I did Colorverse in November and then the Diamine in December. And I was new to the Inkvent calendars, and my ink preferences up until then were pretty much like 5 or 6 inks. I use those in everything. So over this last year, finding more ink variety and appreciating more colors, I wanted to be sure that I chose a calendar that I would be using the inks. And so far I'm been very pleased. So day 1 was Martian Dust, which is kind of a burgundy with a little bit of green sheen. And this is one thing with sheeners, especially in these calendars. There's a lot of shimmers or sheens or super sheens. And I don't really use shimmer. I like a little bit of sheen so it shows, but I don't like super sheeners. So you can see there just that little bit of green that kind of pops out of the red when I angle it. So it's almost, it's true to the name Martian Dust, kind of a rust-ish colored. I'm really liking that. So that one is definitely going to be going into a pen. And I'll zoom out once I kind of go through these and show them all and talk more about them. So feel free to ask any questions if you have any as we go. And this one, yes, I know there is a typo in here because when I first saw this, I thought it was Apollyon, but it's Apollon. And I don't even know if that's pronunciation is correct, but it should be 2 L's. So I'll probably end up retyping that and re-swatching that at some point, but this is what I have for now. And I like this color. It's kind of a golden orange. So it's not a bright orange because I've been using Fire on Fire in one of my pens from Robert Oster, the Pen Addict ink, and I'm really enjoying that. It's become kind of a standard, and I'll show the pen that it's in because it kind of matches the pen too, so that adds to it. But I'm really liking this one. This is one that kind of reminds me of KWZ Honey, and I currently have that in one of my Asvines. So I can see using this one as well. So we're already 2 for 2. So that was a good sign. And then day 3 was the Erebus Crater. And as soon as I saw this ink, I sent a message to Olive Octopus Ink and I was like, I think this is going to be in your wheelhouse. And she confirmed she's already put it in a pen. It's kind of a muted green with a little bit of brown undertones, kind of earth tone plus. So I really like this as well. And once again, a slight little bit of sheen, but not over sheen. And I talk more about these in the videos. And, this is the first glistening ink so far this day 4. I even like this. And it's a shimmer ink, but it's subtle. So I could see possibly using this in something, but with extra fine nibs, the shimmer is not going to come through, but I like how that's coming through, kind of just a subtle little addition in there where it looks like a dark ink until you get the right angle. So that's, in theory, aside from the shimmer aspect, 4 for 4. And then this was odd. Saw someone say it was kind of odd for an advent calendar, and I would agree. The void, it's just a all black with a little bit of sheen, which you don't normally think of black inks in an advent or holiday season, but hey, it works. It never hurts to have another black ink option. There's always going to be a use for more black inks. Now this one, day 6, this was the end of the first video. It's a purplish, but it sheens over quite a lot, almost a little bit too much. I mean, it's a cool looking purple sheen, but for normal use, that's a little bit much for me, but I like the color. I like how it looks. I just don't think I would use this in normal writing, but still a good option that came through. So very pleased to see that, So in that first week, aside from that super sheen and maybe the shimmer, all of those are ones that I will probably try using at some point. Then as we get into the video that just came out for this week that released this morning, actually, the tennis ball yellow LGM is supposed to stand for Little Green Men. I could see using this probably more for art. Hey, Olive Octopus, I was just talking about when Ink 3 came out. As soon as I saw it, I sent you a message saying, I think this is in your wheelhouse. And you confirmed that it was indeed as you put it in a pen. So yeah, happy Inkvent season to all of those who celebrate, or if nothing else, even if you just like following along to see the colors, it's a neat experiment. But this Little Green Men, I like the color. It, a chartreuse yellow green for my normal day-to-day writing. I don't think I would use this, but I think I'm going to try and do some of another stream in the future. One of the I just blanked on the ink archiving book, Dominant Industries ink archiving book. I think this kind of chartreuse yellow, especially in some of the fish colors, will show up really cool. So I'm looking forward to that. Snow Angel is kind of a pinkish brown, which it's a good color. This one's probably towards the lower end of the list, but I could still see using it in the right pen or ink combination. I don't know what that is at the moment, but once again, very pleased. And then this is the kind of the outlier. And even with this is an ink additive. So it's kind of by itself a mother of pearl-esque look. And this is meant to be put into other inks. And it even comes with this little pipette that you use to pull a little bit of this out and mix it in. And I did do that. And I show it in the video, but this is, you can see on here, if I can get the angle to cooperate with the lighting, you can see like over here on the left side where it's mixing in with this blue ink, which is today's ink, which I'll show here in a moment. But so it's a neat premise, to have in an advent calendar, because you essentially can use this with any of the inks. So it's a multi-use day. So it's an interesting, intriguing, I guess, for me, aspect of doing something different to give people, there's only so many of the same colors we can get, especially if you're doing these year after year. So that's just an interesting take on the advent calendar. Flame Nebula, this one is already a favorite, and I don't even have it in a pen. It's kind of a orangish, but a darker orange. So I'm really liking the Fire on Fire, but this gives a little bit more depth to it. And so that kind of orangish red And this is going in a pen as soon as I either make one that has this color material or something. This one is probably my favorite of these first 2 weeks so far. And then the blue hole, which I did with the uh, additive in, it's a nice teal ink. I mean, it's got a little bit of shading. Hey, Lydia, good to see you. It's got a little bit of shading. It's a teal. It's blue hole, so it does. This is another one that'll be good in the ink archiving book painting for a good Caribbean blue water. So that's what now that I have that book and I know that I want to do some more with it, especially into the new year, I want to set aside Inkvent colors to use for that, and limit myself to the Inkvent. So it's handy too that they had the black ink. So I have a black, I've got a yellow, I've got a blue, and I'm sure we'll get some more true red. So we can almost do a full CMYK-esque. And like I said, tomorrow's ink, I'll leave that out just in case anybody's watching today and they don't want to be spoiled. It is, I'll just give a hint. It is a sheener, which I liked the color, but then it sheen to a level where it's still a nice looking color, but it's more sheen than I would like. So I'll leave it at that. And you can see the video. It's up on the channel now. If you want to see it in advance, if you're not spoiler cautious or cognizant. So that's out there, but I'm loving the calendar. I think I chose well. I haven't. Yeah, okay, that's good to know, Olive Octopus, that the first 6 inks you can mix and do art with. I'm a behind on some of the watching because of what I'm going to be getting into next. The whole pen making thing has really gone to a new level. So one thing that's really come out of it is when I bought my rotor fodden. This is the Gentleman Stationer exclusive rotor fodden. I didn't really know what I was going to use it for. So I bought it. I did the video on it. I liked having it, supporting Joe, getting this created. It's a cool color, cool texture. Hey, David, good to see you. And I didn't know what I was going to use for it, and it has found its use. This is now everything pen making. And I have in here a Robiki note, a Lockbee lined, and then a Lockbee dot grid. And when I went to do my first just adventure in pens, I took this with me to Nick Pasquale's shop. And this is where, and let me fix the lighting again. I have my settings up so I can kind of tweak the lighting to make it it's going to be a little dark, but hopefully easier to see some of this because and if it's too dark, please let me know because different monitors and screens show differently. So let me zoom in one level and then adjust because that does look a little dark. I think that's about as good as we're going to get. But this has become my notes. So these are the steps you're going to go through. These are some measurements. This has become my pen making book. And I've been tracking everything in here. So like common measurements as I'm at the lathe and doing things with the calipers and whatnot. So it's making my own reference. And then along that, in this little back pocket, and I put the stuff back in here because I was actually doing some drawing in the first book between meetings today. So I'm keeping one of the Lamy tri-pens in here for writing down the notes and whatnot because it's a little bit more practical in the garage. I have a Traveler's brass ruler, and then I have a machinist ruler that has the measurements in terms of fractions of an inch, and then full millimeter and half millimeter scale here, because there's a lot of the pen making stuff that's like some stuff isn't you think in millimeters, like, oh, I'm doing 13 millimeter threads, but then a lot of it with the micrometers and whatnot to get accurate measurements is in standard. And then this was the pencil that I didn't, kind of my theme. I wanted to be supportive and get it. I like it's cool. It's titanium. but I didn't really know what I was going to use it for. This is the Spoke Model 8. This has become my pencil that lives in here, because what I've started doing is when I first knew I was getting the lathe, you kind of think, what would I make a pen? So I had my initial drawing idea of, oh, I like this thickness of this pen that I own. I like this taper of this pen. I like this. So this drawing was the model for this first pen that I made with Nick. We kind of used the drawing as the rough measurements. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. Well, then I drew another pen that I haven't made anything with. And then this is the drawings for making the mandrels that you use to turn. Because if you make them on your own lathe, then they're going to have better concentricity in your lathe. So learned all sorts of stuff. These are made out of brass. So I had to have all the measurements correct so that all the pin parts thread on there. So I'm just using this as the drawing, but this is the part that, and that's, let me change the light one more time here and see if that'll darken a little. This is a pin. Jim Hines happened to be in Nashville a few weeks ago before Thanksgiving, visiting family who lives outside of Nashville. So I got the chance there was some pen maker gathering at the Signature Pen Company shop. I got to essentially have a private class with Jim where he just kind of walked me through making a pen. I just grabbed a blank out of John David's supply, reached in blind, and I ended up with this orange and gray blank, and this has become my Fire on Fire pen. And it was just, walking through his process, which was similar to Nick's because he helped train Nick, but as Nick has grown, he's changed some steps, and it's kind of neat with anything you're learning, learn under different teachers so you can see how they do things and then adapt it to how you want to do things. But what I did is I took the actual measurements off of this and drew it out because I'm still new enough that making multiple pins with the same dimensions, not 100% there. I can get pretty close, but I want to be able to do exact. So drawing it out and having all the numbers written, let me see if I can zoom one more level here. What am I doing here? That, then this. So you can see like this is the measurement of this section here. This is the amount of threads. The nib is going to stick out this far because I did make one pin that I will call the bent nib 3000, that if you were to screw the cap on, and let me actually, I have it here. So I will show my learning process, nib of shame. You do test fits with a sacrificial nib in the garage, and that's all great. But then eventually you're like, oh, I need to fix that. And I already bent it a little bit back into shape, but so this nib, brand new nib that I screwed in, and you can see it doesn't look very right. Let me get it over a darker. You can see that it's got a nice curve. So when I screwed it on, it bent it almost double over. So learning process, that was a unpleasant mistake, but a good mistake. So now I've been much more cognizant of making sure that I've drilled all the things to the correct level so that I'm not ruining brand new nibs. And then as I've gone through, my drawings are getting better now that I've kind of figured out what I want to do for the process. And then this was one of the first pins I made solo. This was a material that was in the thing, and that Nick had actually made, called Hell Divers. So this was not working with anybody. This was just figuring it out in the garage. And this is now, I've been using this just for in my plotter for work notes. I've got the Lamy Crystal agate in here because there's some gray in this blanket. I know with the lighting going back and forth, it's a little bit dark. See if I can lighten that up a little just to show the material. And this was one of the first pins I actually had the buffing wheels to do the proper finishing steps. So, you know, this was an accomplishment of having a finished pin that I didn't have someone walking me through the steps. Now, there were a couple of attempts before this that ended prematurely, we might say, with either cracked materials, or there's one that got thrown across the garage after I had it almost perfectly finished. And then I was trying to trim the very end to get the little nub off, and I trimmed like a 32nd of an inch too much, and you could see the drill hole. So, learning process. I'm getting much better at measuring. So, I have that one, and then this is the other one that the material looked like just kind of a plain purple, and this isn't really showing it. This looks like the galaxy painting when you have it in the sun or in light. And, simple design, no tapers or anything. So I'm still learning, but, it have a Franklin Christoph SIG in there. It's got Chiku Ren. It's comfortable in the hand, and, I've enjoyed writing with it. So it's been a fun learning process. There is the frustration that comes in of trying to learn something and, do it well and not ruin things. But unfortunately, ruining things helps you learn, because each time I've messed something up, I haven't been, for the most part, repeating those mess ups. So I'm taking that as a win as I've gone through this process. But and the other accomplishment is, when I first got the lathe, my wife's sister was having her 60th birthday, and I said, "Oh, it's in like 4 weeks. I could make a pin as a present." Well, I kind of lost track of time through work, and the party was last Saturday. So last Friday at 5 o'clock, I went and I made a pin, and I was able to get it fully done. And it was one of those things, like, I guess how my brain works with a deadline. I was able to get it made, finish buffing and sanding it the morning of, and I made it for cartridges. It's a little bit shorter, but it turned out great, and I was so excited to have it done that I forgot to take pictures. I do have one little video clip that shows it spinning in the lathe, and that was it. But I finished the pin, and I also should have taken pictures of, and actually I don't, let me check, because I also used to do leather journal covers and leather pin sleeves and whatnot. Well, I needed something to put the pin in, so I dusted off the sewing machine and made a leather case for it. So it was a great feeling of accomplishment to have it all done. I do have a picture of the case, so let me see. I know this is not the best way to show it, but this will work. So the theme of the party was black and white, so I made black leather with white stitching, and then the pin fit in there, a little curve just to give it a little bit of a look. So should have had that out in advance. I didn't think about it. And then do have a picture of the pin. It's not once again, not the best way to show it, but that was it before I put the nib in it and the cartridges. So, because Beth's sister is not necessarily a fountain pen user, so that's why I went with cartridges and kind of kept it simple. And had it ready to write. So, good sense of accomplishment. It was fun to do, and the last couple of days has been maintenance, like getting the garage back in a semblance, and then someone gave me a drill press after that party. And yesterday I took apart a drill press from the glory of 1983 and started restoring it. And I found acorns inside, and I think either feed pellets or possibly rat poison, one of the two, from, I guess, this drill press had lived in a barn for most of its life, and then someone inherited from their father, It's been sitting in their garage. They weren't using it, and they said, "Hey, do you want it?" And they just kind of dropped it off on the driveway. So that's been a fun project. I don't have a need for it yet, but I'm sure that will come into play with the pen making stuff at some point. And it's just another way to kind of do something with your hands, after a day of staring at screens, you know, de-rusting a couple or few decade old piece of machinery that will end up living a new second life. That's fun. I like that. I've really enjoyed getting back into making things and things like that. So it's been a fun little side venture, but it's kind of the pen making update slash garage slash whatever. And then if you've seen, I finally got a camera situation working to get some more videos out. I did the Krina Spark paper, and that came out yesterday. And I couldn't get the audio and video to sync with my normal camera. So I've actually been using my streaming cameras, and that's why I'm much more familiar with adjusting the light as I'm going here to kind of make it work, because bright white paper with recording throws off balances and I'm having to adjust. But I'd love to hear some feedback if you've watched any of those last couple of videos, either of the Colorverse Inkvent or that Krina Spark paper. How does it look to you visually? It seems okay, but I'm going to be my own worst critic. So if you have any feedback, feel free to throw it in the chat or leave a comment, or if you just want to send me a message, that's great as well. I'm open to feedback because I want to make the videos better, and I kind of missed not putting anything out for a while. Hey, Ann, good to see you. And hey, Dragon Drawer. Sorry, took a bit to say hey there. So yeah, I'm glad to be getting those videos out. And speaking of, now that we're getting closer to the end of the year, I've been thinking of, one video that I missed doing completely in a timely manner was, hey, I've been doing this for a year. How's it been? Because I started essentially making my first video November 1st when I did the Colorverse calendar last year. And then getting the lathe and getting into the pen stuff kind of conflicted. And since I was only doing one calendar, so I need to do just a general, I've been doing this for a year, how's it going? And then I want to do like a relook video of all the random things that I got over the last year. I'll probably have to do it as a small series because I think I've made a couple hundred videos this last year. At least it feels like that. I don't know the exact number, but there's been plenty. So to have, look back at everything at once, that might be a little much, but it's something I want to do. So if you have any suggestions of how to do that, what's the best way that you would like as someone watching to kind of hear updates, like the rotor fod, and I've got a good update on that. It's found its purpose now. Some of the pens that I got initially that I'm not using as much, or inks that, I filled up once and haven't reused, or things that I owned and now they're, getting more use. So I kind of want to address some of that because it's one thing I never really got the swing of, was giving those longer term reviews. And there's, I've kind of gotten to where I'm using regular stuff, the plotters, the Me Plus, the calendar systems, but I don't yet have a good grasp on how to account for that. And I was correct. Apparently I've done 199 videos. So the next one that releases will be number 200. So maybe number 200 will be the one talking about, having done this for a year and how it's been going and, plans for the future. It's going to line up well with it being December now. So I'll have to keep that in mind. I didn't realize I was that close to 200, but like I said, any feedback is appreciated. I want to make videos that people enjoy watching or interested in, and it's, everybody has a different opinion on what they want to see, and kind of taking those and combining them into a happy medium, I think, is the best way to go forward. But in terms of calendars and planners, I did run into a little bit of a snafu with my Bible size plotter. The Filofax inserts that I had been using from last year, when this month there weren't any in there. So I got to the first week of December, and then the last part wasn't in there. So I don't know what happened to those initially. So luckily, I haven't had that much to write in that one during this month. So I've been doing the A5 more, but I do look forward to starting, because I get the like 4 days extra, and I think in the plotter on that before I can start the new inserts there for the carry around calendar. But that's kind of the update on that. And then in terms of letter writing, I have fallen a little bit behind. I know, David, you're in the chat. You have one that's hopefully you might have gotten it by now. But I have a stack. I owe Lydia a letter. I owe Anne a letter. So a lot of people in the chat, I'm a little bit behind, and I do apologize. I need to get some of those out. And I also still owe one to... Yeah, and Anne, I'm going to do the pen making stuff, but I want to be more competent before I do that as a video versus talking about it on a live stream, because I don't want someone to potentially look at that video and get bad information. I'm close. I feel like I'm close to being able to do that, but I want to wait a little bit longer just to be sure I get a chance to, make a pin, or have like someone like Nick or TriStar Studio coming to my shop, watching me make a pin and giving feedback. Just so I'm not passing along bad information. And also, I haven't really figured out the best way to film that. In my office, it's easy to have the multiple cameras and whatnot. The flying plastics and whatnot in the garage, I need to figure out how best to put a camera to record it properly. So that is, it's in the plans. And I know letters aren't mandatory. I was doing so good at keeping up with them, because that's one thing I want to send more. And then I just, I got thrown for a loop with, because when I jump into a hobby, I go all in. So, I'd get off work at 5 and I would be in the garage until 8:30 every day, trying to make a pin a day, or trying to fail at making multiple pins one day, or, things like that. So I'm trying to balance both. And now that I've got that deadline pin of the gift done, it's kind of like a little bit of a reprieve, because I needed to be able to make that within the timeline. And like the other thing, I haven't made a video talking about the typewriters yet, and I'm really enjoy using them. I'm loving doing it on the ink cards. And now I'm sitting here thinking, man, I need to go retype all the swatch cards that I have and re-swatch them. So there's little things like that. And then I want to do more of the dominant industry book, and some of those things are best served on streams. And then I will start season 2 of the stationary feed in January. So I'm definitely going to be keeping busy and have like essentially 3 sets of content making / hobby side projects going at once. But honestly, I'll probably do better having more. I'm not the best at when I have downtime, and I'm kind of looking forward to getting back into that recording rotation. And I like talking to the people. That's part of what really drove the interest in making pins, talking to all the pin makers. And now we see where that led me. So I don't have any intentions of opening a store, but there's so many guests that I have confirmations that once we can get it scheduled, it'll just be fun to do that again. And then I know more now than when I started the first time. So I'm going to do a fixed number of episodes and kind of break it into season format, and then not have as much of a break between them, just to keep things a little bit more manageable to, schedule / release, and not burn out on enjoying doing it. So looking forward to that. And then, as always, if you have people that you would like to, hey, I like pins. if you have people that you'd like to see me interview, always you can always leave that as a comment or anything like that as well. Some people that I know I will have is Lisa Vaness, Mr. Brad Dowdy himself, um, Addie from Stationary Stack, Dan from Good Made Better. Hopefully we don't have to reschedule this time. Tracy Cullen, who makes the fountain pen mugs out of Georgia. So those are some people that just are on the short list that I've already had confirmations with. It's just a matter of setting up the time to schedule and do it. So, that's half of a potential season if I were to do like 10 episode seasons right there. And because when we get too far into the year, we'll get into pin shows. That'll be harder to schedule. So I'm going to try and get those a little bit. Well, Dustin, I recognize the icon, but I didn't want to assume because there's always a possibility that multiple people could have the same icon. But good to see you here. Glad that you're able to pop in. Just talked through the first 2 weeks minus tomorrow of the Colorverse calendar, the pen making journey so far. And I didn't mention I've technically made 8 pins up to this point. And I can 8 pins that were finished and functional, but it's now down to 7 because I also hadn't drilled one quite deep enough to put a converter in. And when trying to fix it, it shattered in half. So the 8 pins has gone down to 7. But of those 7, like these 4 that I have at my desk, and this is where it's going to get tricky for me because I love getting new pins that other people make, but I'm also really enjoying using pins that I made. So I'm going to have to come to that, the happy medium once as well. So I've got the orange in here, the gray in here, a blue in here, and then a green in here. So, and I'm not trying to color match for the most part. This one was just too much to not put fire on fire in. That was just, it was almost like it was meant for it. So, but like this one, obviously the jump out choice would be putting red in it. So I use gray, and then this one, I do have a blue in it. It's mostly blue, but it was a new ink I'd bought. And then, the Chiku Ren is about the most unlikely color you'd think in a purple galaxy looking pen. So lots of quacking in the chat. I love it. But that's kind of where I'm going with that. So I want to make more, and then eventually, I'd like to, for channel members, and I don't know when this will be, but people who have supported early on are going to end up getting a pin at some point. Just, it might be one of my learning process pins, but I want to do that just as a way of saying thanks. And it helps me have motivation, because that's one thing someone said is, well, what are you going to do with all the pins you're making? I was like, well, eventually I might sell some, but I don't want to sell them until it's a pin that I would buy. But making them as a gift where people know, hey, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be functional. I just think that's a cool way. And then, that's another way to get feedback of what people like and what they don't. And then they have something they can keep from giving that feedback. So that's going to happen eventually. I've got a bunch of material, and, so I'm not committing to any time frame. And most of the people who are channel members, I haven't addressed through one thing or another. And so at some point that'll happen, and I'll be really, that's just going to be cool. Like I sent another pin that I made that, let me see if I have a picture of it. My friend is a really big fan of Andre Agassi from the 90s. And, if you think of, for those of us who were around that time, the neon yellow of the era, like the Nike neon yellow. Oh, I guess do this and then zoom in. So I did, this pen was like a black with yellow. So it kind of had that Agassi-esque, well, if I can find the other pictures of it, the Agassi-esque look. So I sent that to my friend. He was the best man at my wedding, and I'm surprised I haven't gotten a text. He should have received it today. Because I kind of got him into pins. He was the first person interviewed on the stationary feed. He was kind of my guinea pig test user. So, I like making that and sending it. He didn't ask for it. There's no expectation. So that was just nice of making a pin. And then, the more I get to know people, if I make a pin and then I was like, oh, this material, that looks like something so-and-so would like, then I can kind of send those out while I'm in this learning process. It's like I said, I think I'm doing pretty darn good for having made essentially 8 pins, and I'm getting them to where they line up the cap screw on correctly and things like that. So, I'm well along where I'd like to be. I'm making good progress. And Dragon Drawer and Dustin, thank you for becoming channel members. So that means eventually you're going to get a pin too, randomly showing up. And then along those lines, when I mentioned letters, if you want to receive a letter, I have the link in the video description, I believe. And if not, I will put it in there after, so you can do the Google form to send your address. And then I will send you either a postcard or a letter. I do have some of the demotivational postcards I was separating out of the book earlier, that I was going to send some. And there is a field on there that if you don't want, like if your kids might be getting the mail and you don't want something like that to be showing up, feel free to mark that. But, there's never a bad time for these demotivational postcards. So I was separating these earlier because I want to send a couple out. Because believe it or not, when they come in this little book binding, they're kind of a pain to separate. But I was just saying, Dustin, if you want to receive a letter or postcard, I have a Google form, and I believe I have the link in the video in the stream description. If not, let me see if I can copy it and throw it just in the chat. That you can submit your address to me with the through a Google form, and then that will let me have your address, and I can send you a letter or postcard. And then on that form, it has a place where you can choose whether or not, if I were to, I have some of the curse word washi tape or some of these, demotivational postcards that might have language on it that you might not want a kid to see. I realized I should put that on there so I don't send something that, put someone in an awkward position of having to answer a question. Hey, mom. Hey, dad. What's this word mean? So just trying to avoid some of that. So, and the letters, they could be typed, they could be handwritten, they could be a mixture of both. They could be on a variety of papers. So I'm just kind of going through the list. Like David's letter was on the Crane stationery that I bought when I was at Vanessa last time. I've done some on bank paper. I've done some on correspondence card. So I'm kind of stocked up on a variety of stationery to use for that, because I really enjoyed doing it in a whole bunch of different stamps. So, definitely throw your address on there if you want to receive. I'm trying to find the right button here. If you want to receive a letter, I'm almost caught up from new requests, and then I owe some repeat letters as people have written back, and I need to add into those. But I didn't have that much. I actually apparently have talked more quicker than I thought. So take another just quick look at some of these Colorverse, because when I first started going through those, it was early in the stream, and just get a consensus of, which ones have been your favorites so far. I'm not doing the Diamine. I'm just doing the Colorverse, but I'm pretty much loving all of these, aside from my general not using shimmers or super sheeners much. But these colors have been great. even the additive, I like the idea of it, that it's something different to add in. I know Olive Octopus, you've added it to what, how many did you say? Like 6 or 7 different inks just to change their properties. But, you know, even the ones that I don't necessarily think I would use now, looking back, I should have sent this along with that neon yellow pen. I might have to send that. Yeah, the Erebus Crater, that one is a great one. The Martian Dust and the Flame Nebula, I think if I had to choose one as of right now, Flame Nebula would be my winner. Something with that kind of orangish hue. It reminds me of the Sailor Tea Time ink that I have in my Pilot 92 that I really enjoy. So, and then I'm not the biggest fan of super sheeners, but I love the purple of the Sun Grazing Comet. I mean, that's just a good purple. I just don't use super sheeners all that much. Yeah, the Milky Sea, if I was going to use a glistening ink, I like this one because it's subtle. It's like, oh, that's nice blue ink. And then you turn it ever so slightly and it catches that light. And then it's like, oh, there's shimmer mixed in there. And it's, you know, it's just subtle. So that's one that if it would come through the extra fine nibs, I would even consider using that. And it might be one that I'll play around with, you know, just maybe find a blue blank in the section of, or the selection of blanks I have, and try and make a pen out of a pen just for that. You know, force myself to use one of the larger size nibs that I now have in the box and use that. Yeah, David, Milky Sea, it's, the color is great. And even with the shimmer, I'm like, I'm not fully opposed to using it. So that's the thing that really surprised me. Since I just don't normally think about shimmers, that one I'm like, you know, I kind of like the look. It might be enough to overcome the general non-using of shimmer inks. But there's a lot of earth tones in here, and then you have the outlying chartreuses and blue hole, things like that, that are also great colors. But Erebus Crater is one that I've seen on a lot of people mention. It's just, it's a different color, and it kind of fits in the earthy tone theme with a little bit of sheen, but not over sheening. So just little things like that that are adding in great. And then the glistening solution, yeah, I've seen on Lisa, I don't know which all Discords you put it on. I know you put some on the Gentleman Stationer Discord. I think you might have put some on, I don't know if you put them on Slack or if you put them on Ink Dependence Discord. I'm a little bit behind of my what's posted where reading, but the colors do look cool. Just that little bit of additive, because aren't there multiple colors of shimmer in this? Like in the, you know, the, and even just if you needed a mother of pearl-esque look, this by itself is not terrible if you had that need and you could get it thick enough to write with. But, you know, for it to show up in the blue hole, mixing it in like the black. Okay. Yeah, the mid, I knew I thought I'd seen it 3 places. So the Pen Club one, and then definitely bring those to Pen Club Saturday if you're coming. So I'd love to see some of those swatch cards in person. But it's a neat idea. You know, hopefully they have some more of these Gleam Mix, because that they didn't have that before. And is that, I don't know if that's something new to Colorverse or if they have that as a general offering, but I like the idea of it. Even if it's not for me, I'm sure Beth will use that in some of the inks, since she does like shimmer and she does like sheens. So this is already a win, because the colors that I'm not going to use, she more than likely will use in short order, especially since she likes to match pens and inks. If I make her another pen that matches one of the inks, then she'll definitely use it. So that's a nice thing to add in with all the random blanks that came with the lathe. Potential for color matching at the start. But I'm really liking this. And then the diamine, there might be something in there that enough people do that if there's a color that I see in a swatch that I really like, I'm sure it would be easy enough to track down a sample of it after the fact. So, but yeah, Flame Nebula though is going to have to possibly go in a pin before Saturday. I really want to write with that. So I'm going to have to look and see what other pins I have around that are ready for a clean. And that's going to need to go in one. And then the one for tomorrow that, you know, if you've seen it, it sheens too much for me. I really liked the color. It looked great. And then once it dried, it was too much of a super sheener for my preference. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who will like that because it's along the nature of the dark lilac or the, you know, some of the Lamy inks that tend to sheen over heavily in a certain manner. So if you've used dark lilac, I probably spoiled you a little bit unintentionally, but Dustin, I am terrible about cleaning pens. I love using pens. I hate cleaning pens. And I don't even know how many pens have ink in them right now. And I probably should have a better understanding and clarity and thoughts on that, but I have to see how that goes. And then the other thing, you know, I need to go through and start retyping swatch cards for all of my other inks so I can re-swatch them where I can actually read the ink name. And hindsight, I would have written the day with the typewriter, but I don't want to go back and risk messing up these. So for the Colorverse, I'll just keep writing it down there. Oh, I guess get that, and the camera helps. But I'm definitely going to type all of the ink names because I can actually read them, and you know, it's a much easier and it looks better to me, and it gives me a reason to use one of the 5 typewriters sitting to my left. Soon to be 7, because I have 2 coming with family who are coming to visit next week. So, you know, definitely need to make a video at some point on the typewriter stuff as well. And that's one that, you know, now that I have these cameras working in an acceptable way, I think I can do that easy enough. Because I have even a camera setting that, let me see if it's, which one is it? Is it this one? No. Where I can have it set to show one of the typewriters. So if I'm doing the stream, let me get it moved over to that one. That I can do. Got too many buttons. Oh, it's not that one. So that one shows that typewriter there, so I can do a type on a stream and have the other microphone over there. So I might do that at some point, just talking through as I'm doing ink cards or something like that, since I can. That's the one I've been using to type all of the ink cards on, because it's just it's too big to move away on the shelves. It just lives on the desk there. So it's easy to access, and there's a whole stack of coloring cards next to it. So that's in store. I've been doing, like, between meetings or at lunch, I'll like type 1 or 2 cards just to, you know, not be looking at a screen for a minute. And then, you know, I'm sure eventually once I get through the 100-ish inks, then I can go through and swatch them all again. So fun process, but I think it'll be enjoyable because, you know, I'm sure I'll rediscover inks that I own that I hadn't seen in a long enough time that I might be ready to give another shot, or that'll be a better base if people want samples, that I have a better selection to choose from. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there for tonight. Like I said, I was talking about the pen making, the progress there, and the future plans. And then I'm definitely going to do that wrap up video. So like I said, if you have any suggestions on any videos that you saw over this last year that I did that you'd like to hear, like the longer term thoughts on, something like the Me Plus or the Plotters or the Rotorfaden or things like that, let me know. I'm going to have to look through what all videos I did and decide revisiting papers, and I might do it like a revisiting papers and stationery, revisiting pens, and then revisiting stuff. The adjacent items. That might be a easy way to break that up into a couple of videos to not have too much in one. But I do look forward to revisiting some of those things and how they've been incorporated into everything. So, as always, I appreciate y'all taking some time to kind of join in and, chat. I love that people are having good conversations in the chat. That actually, I like the people interaction more than I ever thought I would. And that's why I think I enjoy streaming more than making videos in many ways. And so I'm not going to stop making videos, but I love doing the streams to add on. It's just a different way of being able to have that real-time interaction, which as a natural introvert who, of course goes and starts a YouTube channel, that's, I guess, how it works these days. So I will have another stream next Thursday. So hopefully you're able to join then. It'll be the same time. Yeah, the chat, Lisa, is the best part. You get, seeing friends who I've interact with on other channels or in real life, or I know outside who are also pen people. It's like a cool custom mix of, of community, which I love. So it's always going to be great. So be sure and join in next week. And I'll have another video coming out next Thursday morning for the next week of Colorverse. Just doing that. And then the following Thursday, I'll have the last ones wrapping up. And then I'm going to work on getting at least one of those, retrospective type videos done, hopefully over the weekend to release sometime next week. And like I said, if you haven't submitted your address for a letter, do that, because that's another plan I have over the weekend, is making sure I'm caught up on return letters that need to be sent. So as always, hope you all have a good night, and I will see you on the next stream or on the next video.